So hey, how are you doing, folks? Ce faci? That's all that I know. And some bad words, obviously, but maybe after the event. You can teach me something else. So it's really a pleasure to be here. It's quite an achievement, 100 meetups. Kudos. We didn't make it with NG Party, unfortunately. But yeah, maybe next life. So today, I'm going to be talking about web components, which is going to be like second iteration of the talk I did back in the day in Revo.js at 2019. So hopefully you will enjoy it and you will learn something new. And yeah, let's find out if we are there yet with web components. Before we start, let me introduce myself. My name is Martin Hochel. I'm a principal engineer at Microsoft working on Fluent UI and its ecosystem in order to unify user experiences across the Microsoft products on the web platform. Okay, so before we can start talking about web components, we need to quickly understand what web components are. So let's try this in 3 minutes, shall we? Web components is a set of native web platform features or different technologies for building reusable custom user interfaces. And there are 3 main parts: custom elements, shadow DOM, and HTML templates. What are custom elements? So with custom elements, we can define new elements for HTML, like hello world in this example. And in order to do that and be able to use it, we need to do 3 things. So first, you need to create a class that extends from base HTML element. Then you need to specify a unique word for that particular element. And last but not least, you need to register it to a global registry via define a method. All good. Shadow DOM. Shadow DOM is one of the most powerful features, but also most of hated features time to time because it's quite complex, to be honest. But in a nutshell, let's say we have a div with ID host and you have a span which says I'm in the light DOM. In order to create a shadow DOM, you just call attach shadow function on that particular node, and it will create a separated DOM tree within the document, which is isolated from the other parts of the document. So it's really powerful. And if you're going to do this, the browser will render a new shadow root, which is the completely isolated DOM tree within the DOM. Last but not least, HTML templates. We have a new tag for that called template, which is an inert element. And you can specify any kind of markup inside, styles, whatever HTML you want, even additional custom elements, if that's your case. And one of the powerful features of this is the browser completely ignores it. So you can put any kind of huge markups inside that you can instantiate later on. Another new tag is called slot. This only works in Shadow DOM. It's quite powerful. It's like very similar to what React is doing with children. It's basically used as a content projection of your light DOM into the Shadow DOM via this composition and declarative approach. Cool, so now we know web components and we can wrap it up. I'm just kidding. All right, so that said, we can cover or check how web components progressed across the 5 years, like since the last talk I did. So back in the day, only 6% of all pages use web components, which is quite a small number. And nowadays, it grew rapidly, in my opinion, like from 6 to around 20%. That's quite huge, right? And why is that? Well, the adoption grew significantly in small and big companies. Web components are used in various popular products like Apple Music, YouTube, GitHub. We use it at Microsoft as well, IBM, Adobe, and the list goes on and on. So that was probably one of the part of the bigger adoption across the years, right? But also, probably, the native features improved during those years. And now we will now explore what actually changed and what can be used nowadays. Before I will continue, I will be also using a new browser support matrix called Baseline. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but it's basically a new standard saying to us developers what kind of particular platform feature is supported in all the major browsers. And they have 3 stages, like limited availability, newly available, and widely available. And obviously, based on your browser matrix support needs, you can do the educated decision based on this matrix. All right, so templating. As I already mentioned, the template tag is already there, and you can define template like this, which is probably going to be used for some user element that will be rendering your name and your contact address via email. Do you see any problems with this? It's very nice templating, right? Well, not really, because it's just static content without any kind of interpolation or expression support that we nowadays have in all these frameworks. So you need to manually query these nodes and handle the bindings manually within the component. So it's not very good developer experience per se. So thankfully, there are some new proposals coming. One of these is template instantiation, which is still not being implemented, but it was created in 2017, and also a new proposal called DOM parts, which builds on the previous one, and it's even more powerful, basically trying to mirror what's already present in the modern frameworks like React and others. And with these proposals, we'll be able to use a full-fledged like templating system within the template. Obviously, we will need to create the instances, or state, and manage that within your components, but it will be automatically propagated to the view when rendering. So that's nice, but yeah, it's not there yet. What about styling? Styling with web components is same as usual, except if you don't use Shadow DOM, because you need to unlearn what you learned. Shadow DOM is, as I mentioned, powerful, but might be complex. So how styling works? If you're going to create a new Shadow DOM or Shadow tree within your host, it will be completely encapsulated from the rest of the DOM. Well, there is this asterisk because it's not entirely true. Some properties will still leak, like inheritable properties, for instance, font family, line height, and stuff like that. It's by design. But in a nutshell, if you're going to use Shadow DOM, let's say we have a style declaration for a span with the color green, and then we create our Shadow DOM within the div, and at the bottom there is this span which says I'm in the light. So that style tag or that style definition is going to be applied only to the light DOM, right? The Shadow DOM is isolated in this case, and the browser is going to render it in this way. So I'm in the shadow is black, and I'm in the light is using the definition I provided. Just a side note, encapsulation used to be solely native part of Shadow DOM, but nowadays you can also achieve similar thing with standard DOM or light DOM per se. You can use standard CSS or new CSS advancements like scoping or layer, or you can just go to build time and use CSS modules to create these unique robo classes for your DOM structure. What about styling Shadow DOM? We already know it's like isolated except these properties. So we can use CSS variables to basically define public APIs for customization in your components within the Shadow DOM. It's like kind of low level and very granular, but it works. Basically, you just specify for particular CSS parts your CSS variable, and in the user land, they can just specify or override these variables and customize the output. For the bigger chunks, we have CSS shadow parts, which leverage part attribute. So basically, and again, in your templates, in your Shadow DOM, you specify particular parts, and then the user can leverage this new pseudo selector called part and style these chunks based on their needs. What about defining styles? So most common case with web components is using inline style tag within a template, or you can even go with external style sheets. There might be performance problem with that, but it is what it is. And newly added to like capabilities of styling definitions, we have new specification called constructible style sheet, which is a very powerful way how to alter CSS. So you'll programmatically create a new instance of sheet, then you provide your CSS, and then you need to adapt that sheet either in a global document or in your shadow root. And this is very highly optimized, memory efficient, without duplications. So it's pretty cool stuff. To build on this, hopefully soon enough, we will also have like native CSS modules in the browser, which basically leverage ECMAScript module syntax to import your CSS. And under the hood, it will be transformed to this constructible style sheet, which then you can adapt. So this will be very useful for sharing various styles across your web components. All right, what about globals? globals tend to be a problem, right? Especially with web components. So we need something like scoped registries. What do I mean by that? So let's say there are two packages, right? One created by organization foo, a different one created by bar, and both define the same new HTML element called hello world with their specific behaviors. And you as a user want to use both, right? Because every has something different that you would like to use. So you will just use it, I don't know, by CDN or whatever are you using. And then you're going to render it, but things will explode, right? Because as I mentioned at the beginning, the custom element registry is global and every element needs to be unique. So thankfully, there is a new thing coming to the browsers called scope custom element registries, which are suited for these particular use cases. So you will need to create the registry on your own, define the specific element within that registry. Then when you're going to create the scopes, again, you're going to need to reference the particular registry. And in the end, in your browser, when you're going to declare your content, both of these elements, hello world, I have a typo there, will work as expected. So within scope 1, v3, you're going to get the foo hello world, and the scope v2, you're going to have the bar. So this is currently also implemented in some canaries for Safari, as far as I remember, but hopefully this will be fully available in all browsers soon. Accessibility. This was a big problem, 5 years ago, all related to Shadow DOM. Obviously, if you don't use Shadow DOM, the same accessibility principles applies, but yeah, Shadow DOM was, maybe still is, a problem. Let's find out. So let's say you have this custom element called my button. Inside, you have Shadow DOM created, which re-implements your custom button for design system or whatever. And let's say you want to programmatically focus that custom element or just clicking on that custom element. What do you think it will happen? Well, nothing. Thankfully, we have a new feature when creating Shadow DOM called delegate focus. But when we're going to set this in your custom element implementation, everything will work as expected. So basically, if you're going to programmatically focus the my button, the first focusable element within your shadow tree is going to be selected. So native behaviors will be there as expected. What about custom elements within forms? Probably you need forms for your web applications, right? So again, simple use case scenario. You have a form. Inside, you are using some standard HTML, label input, classic stuff, right? But also, you want to use this new fancy my input element, which is like a design system kind of input in order to acquire some data. So what happens with this? I'm going to provide my name. I'm going to submit. But I'm seeing only data from the standard HTML, from the basic, right? So that's a problem, as you can see. It's not very suitable for real-life applications. So thankfully, this is also solved with a new API. It's called element internals. You can enable it just by specifying various properties, like associate the element, and then calling attach internals method. But unfortunately, or I don't know, fortunately, you need to manually handle all these behaviors that you get with the standard HTML elements. But it's there and it works. So with this enabled, again, I'm going to provide my name, I'm going to submit, and the values are there in the form, so I can easily use it for my data acquisition. A last very problematic thing is cross-root area. What do I mean by that? So like, there are 3 examples. First one is the standard HTML, like we have label and input, referenced by 4 to the ID, that works. Even if you're going to create a shadow DOM that wants to reference from inside something in the outside world, that works, but the opposite doesn't work. So if you have like custom element and you want to reference it via area attributes from the outside to the shadow root, that will not work at all. So again, accessibility problem. There is a new proposal which will solve this called reference target. So again, when creating or attaching Shadow DOM, you will just specify a reference target, name your input which you want to reference from the outside, and things will work as expected. So hopefully this will also get better adoption across the browsers. That was about accessibility. One more thing maybe related to also accessibility and progressive enhancements called customized elements. So we already know how to define custom element, which are, by the way, called autonomous custom elements. You define your tag via class, and you can use it as a custom new element, right? But there is also a better way to basically enrich existing controls, because if you do the previous thing, you need to reinvent the wheel. You need to write all these behaviors for your button to work as expected, as users and browsers are used to work, which is a lot of unnecessary work, basically. So with customized building elements, you can extend native browser functionality and then leverage is attribute, which is very similar like Angular directive, which just enhances the behaviors, and you are not losing accessibility or progressive enhancement. Everything works as expected. So this is my favorite part, but we cannot use it at all because Safari decided to not adopt this quite a long time ago, I don't know, 2017, and still they didn't change their mind. There are like strong pushbacks from the community. Hopefully, in the next 5 years, things will change. Server-side rendering with web components. Now it's not going to be possible. Back in 2017, there was a proposal to create a declarative shadow DOM, which was closed, rejected, won't implement. Sad days, but guess what? Because valid pushbacks from the community and from the browsers and developers, folks understood that this is really necessary, and I'm very happy to announce that nowadays we have declarative shadow DOM available across all the major browsers. And how does it look like? Well, when you're gonna write your custom element within your markup, you just use that, and now the template tag has a new attribute called shadow root mode, and this basically turns on the declarative shadow DOM. So you can specify your markup declaratively within the element, including your styling and whatever. And when browser is gonna render it, it's gonna hydrate, create the shadow root for you, and everything will work as previously, right? This is really great, except there are still some gotchas, right? Like this works, but there is no like official specification how to implement it on your server, right? So again, it depends on what technology are you using, how are you structuring your components. You will probably need to build some AST in order to output this declarative shadow DOM when you server-side your content. So that's not still solved officially. And also, even if you're gonna solve it, there's gonna be a lot of content, because imagine for every button on your page or every paragraph on your page, this template shadow root mode will need to be printed out. So your HTML can go very big. But this is awesome start. But what's even more exciting is a follow-up from declarative shadow DOM called declarative custom elements. This is only in a proposal stage, but the gist is basically the whole process of creating custom elements with shadow DOM, with templating, etc., will be fully declarative. So I showcased so far only imperative APIs, but now with this in all the browsers, you'll be able to just statically define your definition of component, including like template bindings, etc. And this is also very important because this goes beyond JavaScript runtime. You can just write this in your PHP or whatever technology you're using, or I don't know, even the user doesn't have to have enabled JavaScript, and the browser will understand it, and then you will define it only once within your markup, and you can use it as the standard element, custom element, with all the functionality baked in. So this is very, very big, and I hope we will see the light being this implemented across all the browsers. So to recap the features, obviously it's not being solved. It's not rainbows or butterflies, but in the last 5 years, the progress is quite significant. Like most of the critical parts, including accessibility, globals, and server-side rendering, had progress, are partially solved. And yeah, like I think the traction is there, and hopefully in the next 5 years, if I'm gonna do this talk, it's gonna be 10 seconds because everything is gonna be already there. All right, what about interoperability? Because the trademark of web component is write once, use, or it works everywhere. Does it? Well, I'm using React a lot. Probably you're also using React. So React and web components, what kind of issue can happen? So let's say we have this very simple React component, which has some data object, and we want to use my demo custom element, which specifies attributes as its API to configure the template, right? So if I'm going to render this via React, it will output, hello, Martin, the engineer. Awesome. What about this scenario where my custom element doesn't use these attributes like name or job, rather it uses a property definition and it accepts user, which is like object, right? So the output is going to be like this. Hello. Yeah, that's awesome. It doesn't work. It's broken, right? And when you're going to take a look in your DevTools, you're going to see the output being printed out, the user equals object object. Yeah, that doesn't work, React. Thank you very much. Why is this? Because React, if React doesn't know a particular element, it will by default emit attributes and stringify them. So this is completely broken. Not anymore, because starting React 19, React have full support for web components. So this is really cool. If you're interested into like more details, you can check custom elements everywhere webpage where they have all these tests covered. Just to sum it up, the interop summary is there. It's finally there. All major frameworks, 100%. So not a problem anymore, which is great. Okay, last part. Using web components and the patterns, how to use them. Yes, you can build whole applications with web components. Should you? I don't know. It depends on your needs, I guess. I will just point out, if you're going to do that, you will definitely need a framework. So you will need to learn some new technology across various areas. So if you want, you can do it. But I don't think they are meant to be for the whole web applications per se. Where web components shine are the leaf nodes. In particular, like some kind of standalone widgets, or using them to enhance HTML, or even to write design systems. What I mean by widgets? Let's say part of the functionality of your application doesn't need server-side rendering and other kind of related things. You can just implement this kind of chessboard, put it on your web page, and yeah, like your users can play a game of chess. If they don't have JavaScript, well, no chess for you, but this is very good use case for reusable web component that you can plug and play across various applications that you have if you need something like that. Personally, I like this pattern most. I call it declarative jQuery. Maybe you remember the old days of jQuery UI, where you just targeted a particular selector and you have these super fancy selectors or I don't know what kind of controls. This is also possible with web components in a more declarative fashion, obviously, and it's also like basically fully accessible, follows progressive enhancement and other things. So just to give you this example, you have this content. Without that custom element, it will render the content on the web page. So I know what's happening. But if I enable JavaScript, this browser support custom element will enrich the user interface by fetching some data about a particular feature in this case and rendering the browser support. So it's really nice. And this is definitely not like one of the patterns that we are used to from React. But again, as I mentioned, I think this is the most powerful approach to start using or adapting web components in your applications, if you have such a needs, of course. About design systems, yes, you can use web components if the design system needs a lot of self-contained templates or more complex structures. Obviously, you don't want to write all this HTML by our own. Obviously, AI can generate that for you, so it might not be that issue anymore, but still. Also, if you want to like UI coherence and encapsulation is a good candidate. And obviously, if your particular application needs support of various frameworks, then it makes sense to create a design system in a web component, so you don't have to rewrite the design system for every technology. It kind of depends. If you need server-side rendering with your design system, it might be tricky. There might be dragons. As I mentioned, I don't know, let's say you are using React for your application and want to consume web components for design system. You need to come up with a specific renderer that will, again, provide these declarative Shadow DOM templates for you when you are rendering or streaming the HTML from React site. It's definitely possible, but just stay aware that there might be dragons. And in terms of implementation approach, there is this golden rule: not everything needs to be a web component, which is also not something that we are used to from these frameworks like React and others, where we basically encapsulate every atom in a reusable component. That's not the case for web components. So I will encourage you, if you're gonna start using that, just start with custom element. And if you really need all of these features of Shadow DOM, yeah, add the Shadow DOM if you want, but keep the Shadow DOM flat, meaning don't nest Shadow DOM into another Shadow DOM if possible. And you also need to be more careful about how you structure the content within the Shadow DOM if you're gonna use it. So just to wrap it up, web components, are we there yet? Well, we are not there yet, but we are definitely getting there. And as I mentioned, hopefully in 5 years, we'll be completely there, and we will be able to use it in various platforms, thanks to declarative custom elements, etc., etc. But until that time, thanks for having me, and enjoy the event. Thank you.